Hey, church family, welcome to another episode of Cross My Heart, where we're studying some of the conditional and unconditional promises of God in the Bible. And today I'd like to bring your attention to a conditional promise that comes from Jesus in the book of Matthew, chapter 11, a very, very famous scripture. Verse 28, he says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." Verse 30, "For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." A couple of words, because I love the definition of certain words, especially when we translate from Greek, for instance, to English. Sometimes things can be lost in translation. So I love going into and diving into some of what these words mean. And for instance, the word weary, we probably know it's about the same definition, but it means to exhausted in labor. And that word labor will become important later on. To be depleted or worn out, both physically and mentally, both physical and mental labor. So come to me, all who are weary, if you're exhausted from physical or mental labor. Those that are burdened, it literally means weighed down or overloaded. Come to me if you are physically, mentally exhausted, if you're burdened, if you're literally weighed down, or if you're overloaded, and I will give you, Jesus says, I will give you rest. If you come, there's a condition. If you come to me, I will give you rest. And that word rest is interesting. It has nothing to do with sleep necessarily. It actually means refreshed after the process. Refreshed after the process. And then he says to take my yoke upon you. Back to that thought of refreshed, when we complete the process and work of Christ, we are refreshed. Why? And that brings in verse 29. He says, take my yoke upon you. Take on my yoke. A yoke in Jesus' day was a wooden beam to attach two animals to be able to do work together. So he says, take on my yoke, the wooden beam that joins or unites two together for the purposes of work. That's you on one side, me on one side, and Jesus on the other. The burden is light because Jesus is carrying the brunt of the load. And when we attach ourselves to Christ for the cause of Christ, when we're doing the work, even when we feel weary, when we feel broken down, when we feel overloaded, when we complete the process, we have rest on the other side, a refreshment through the process. And one last thought, Paul brings to us another thought in the book of Galatians, chapter 6, verse 9. It says, do not become weary, that same word, weary in doing good. Do not become weary in doing good. For when we work together with Christ, when we complete the process that Christ has for us, when we're doing work together, when we're on one side, Jesus is on the other, He's carrying the brunt of the load. When we're working together, when we complete the process, then we get refreshed when we come to Christ. And so I just want to encourage you today, if you're feeling weary, if you're feeling broken, if you're feeling burdened, if you're feeling overloaded, if you're feeling mentally exhausted, if you're feeling physically exhausted, whatever you are, when you complete the process and we come to Jesus, when we're working with Christ, we will be refreshed. It's a promise. It's a promise. So stand firm on that promise today, and I hope that you're encouraged, and we're praying for you. We love you, and we'll see you on Sunday.